So like, this is like really pissing me off. So I just got a new iPad, and my old phone was a Huawei, which, as you know, has had some problems in America. So I had to get a new phone, which is coming soon. And so I had some mind map programs on Windows. So basically, I tried to find like the Apple equivalent, transferred everything over, and then yesterday and about an hour ago, all the like mind maps just got like text fucked. So there's all like exclamation points or like question marks. And I also have my like work, and then also my like research project, which all got fucked. So I'm like pissed off.
Okay, let me just write down this time code so I remember to edit out this extremely boring part. Cool. We're back with another episode of L0G1c9UY After Dark, the show where I chat with my friends and or enemies. I'll let them self-identify. And today I'm chatting with Kai. Kai, how the heck are you?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm doing pretty good. Do you want to go by Kai, or what do you want to go by?
Yeah, I learned early on that having a Chinese name as my kind of persona was a terrible idea, because some of the pronunciation is actually really hard for English speakers, so I just go by Kai just to save everybody some time.
Oh, see, I thought Kai was a Chinese name. I'm clueless.
Oh yeah, no, that part is, but like, so the whole name, so it's Ma Shi Kai, but the sh is kind of like a weird sound that doesn't really exist in English. It's kind of like like be quiet, but I hear like she and
I see
shush and all that. I'm like, okay, so I'm just gonna go by Kai. Simple, easy. So
that is easy, man. Three letters are the sweet spot. That's right. The ideal length for names, in my opinion. 3 letters, 1 syllable. There you go.
You got it.
Don't get much better than that. So maybe you should tell us a little bit about do a little intro there. Promote something.
Yeah, okay. So my name's Kai. I'm a legal analyst. So basically my job involves researching laws and understanding how laws can be implemented. So basically I take an idea. So I'm a state worker for a pretty big department, and I'm also going to school for law school. So I'm a 3L, which is a 3rd year. So I'm graduating next year, taking the bar in California, and then from there, God only knows. But kind of my focus, it actually does tie in with my Twitter life very well. So it actually is based off cybersecurity and cyber information, and kind of dealing with this topic of censorship, which is what we're going to talk about all day today. So it's just kind of always something I've been really interested in, even before. Previously, I lived in China. I worked in China, studied Chinese. Actually, I was thinking about being a diplomat, but then kind of switched to the legal route, and here we are. So I do stream very, very rarely. Kind of don't have it into me to make a YouTube channel or anything like that. So it's kind of a great opportunity just to come on other people's shows and just talk about stuff that I at least know something about.
Too much work making videos, am I right?
Yeah, like I tried to make a few, and even got some good like topics and feedback for people, but I'm just like, oh man, all this editing and like even sound checks, I'm just like, this is a nightmare. Maybe later if I can get somebody I can hire like an assistant or a producer, or I'm just gonna do like 30-second TikTok videos or something. I don't know.
That sounds like a good idea. I said I was gonna do a video on the rise and fall of the alt-right circa like 2015 to 2017. But fuck that, man. That sounds like a lot of work.
Yeah.
I can't be bothered.
Yeah, I mean, it really is just a lot of work. I mean, versus just, like retweeting someone online, or just like a snarky little comeback that gets, 4,000 likes. I'm like, okay, this is a lot easier and maybe even more effective. I don't know.
Seriously, why bother making a video when you can just tweet that Ted Lasso is a war crime and get 4,000 likes?
Exactly.
All right. Before we begin, I should do this new segment I just invented first, called talking shit about the last guest. Man, that David Chirat totally just fucked up last time. The bad recording, 100% his fault. I take no ownership of it. It was 100% him. I had some technical problems on my end, so David was like, "Oh yeah, oi mate, I can record." And then he told me he checked the levels. He didn't fucking check the levels. So if you have any complaints, please send them to at Discord Spies at twitter.com. Man, what a fucking asshole that guy. Let me tell you.
I actually tried listening to it too, but yeah, it was like unlistenable. I'm like this 32-bit quality audio is like it's like listening through like 1820s, sound recorder or whatever. I was like, Jesus.
Well, I got the I got the audio and his levels. You can't. This is a not a visual medium, so you can't see where my hands are. But just imagine that I'm holding one hand up really high. His levels were up here, and then my levels were down at the floor. So even if you pick them up, you're at the floor. So like you're just picking up the room noise at that point.
Yeah.
So just total garbage recording, unlistenable. A real black mark on the otherwise unblemished Logic Guy After Dark track record.
Knock on wood, it doesn't happen again.
Well, I'm recording. I've got everything. See, the way I record is he gave me the audio all on one track. The way I record, we're all on our own tracks. So that right there makes it a lot easier. It also makes it a lot easier to in editing chop up what you say so that it sounds like you said something that you didn't.
I look forward to me talking about deep fakes and getting deep faked myself. It's very meta.
Yeah. So what should we talk about?
So like I
That was a bad. I'm sorry. That was a terrible segue. I apologize. Let's try that one again. 3, 2, 1. So what should we talk about? Oh fuck. Did we have a topic?
We did. I mean, we generally just DM'd each other about just censorship in general. So I made this lovely little flow chart, which of course we can't see. But so basically we can take this, starting from a macro level, we can start on two sides of the coin. So like when people talk about censorship, there's two meanings they can be talking about. They can be talking about censorship in like the actual like legal definition where it's the government censoring something, or we can kind of have a talk about corporate censorship, which would be, media's social medias and stuff censoring things out. Those are two very different topics. So I'll let you kind of pick which way you want to go.
I keep talking to people who tell me that they don't consider corporate censorship really censorship, that they only consider censorship like from the government.
I think that's being a little pedantic. I mean, and that's even coming from my background. Like the fact that social media companies have so much presence and power now kind of makes them de facto censorships like the government in a way. That some people use as a legal argument, which that's kind of bullshit. But as like a general, like realistic way of talking about things, I think it's true. You have people that get censored. I mean, they get things literally deleted, or they get copyright strikes and stuff like that. But there's just so many nuances of what is censorship and what's being censored. So even that's its own little topic.
I do think the subject is a lot more nuanced than people give it credit for. It really isn't an argument between people who are against free speech and people who are for it. It's an argument about what the value means and what the importance is to our society and what to do when one person's rights butt up against another. I don't think it's about, but I don't think there's any side that's just against freedom of speech. Not really, at least.
Yeah, I mean, that's actually one of my biggest points I see online is I always take like umbrage with those people who are like, I'm a free speech absolutist. I mean, I think that's honestly just a nonsensical term. I mean, there's no. Okay, yeah, I mean, that was one of the things I was going to like clarify with you, because I mean, you've never said that, but like, yeah, I see that all the time. Like, that would literally mean you can say or do anything without any like societal or legal repercussions. Like you can defraud your friends, defame everybody. You can lie about stock price. I mean, it's a sliding scale when you talk about like what is free speech, and I think that's where you get into that nuance. You can have an actual conversation about it.
Yeah, I've been on both sides of that because I've talked to Mark Meacham, Count Dankula, and he's claimed to be a free speech absolutist.
Yeah,
I tried to convince him to show him he wasn't. But also I've had people describe me as a free speech absolutist. And I've been clear. I would never use that term to describe myself, and that there is no value that I would say on its own outweighs all other values. So I do believe in limits to on speech, like for instance slander laws, laws curtailing threats, things of that nature. I'm definitely not an absolutist.
Yeah, and I've actually seen Dankula talk about that a lot too, and a few more of the alt-right that like constitute redheaded libertarian girl or whatever. I think she said that a few times. I just laugh because it's just an idiotic term, honestly. But like, yeah, kind of seeing where you fit on the scale, I would definitely say you'd be more. I don't know. You could do like left or right. Like, let's just say like
Left, right. Do these concepts have any meaning?
No, I mean
The real scale is between freedom and authoritarianism. That's what I always say.
Yeah, let's just say a 10 is like, we'll say 10 is like the literal free speech absolutist. Like he doesn't believe in anything. And a 0 would be like, how it was when the Gutenberg press came out and literally every single printed thing had to be like approved by the king. I would say it'd be more like an 8 or a 9. I mean, I'm just throwing that out there, but
I mean, on that scale, we probably almost everyone would probably cluster pretty close to like a between 7 and 9. I would imagine.
Yeah, I think that's pretty accurate, honestly.
With one being literally the king has to approve all speech.
And
I would say that would be a rather extreme position.
I mean, and that's how it was for most of human history, especially with like the written word. I mean, up till 1780s. I mean, America really was like the pioneer in this, and still is. I mean, it's really baffling when you look at even Canada's free speech laws, and they're just so much more restrictive. Especially in the UK. I mean, obviously you get to the authoritarian countries, and it's still basically like a 2 or 3. I mean, North Korea would be maybe honestly your 1 still. It's because you can't post anything without approval.
Right.
So yeah, kind of that's always the first step. So when people kind of just start throwing that free speech absolutist, I'm like, okay, like we're not having a serious conversation, because then I have to go through the whole spiel like, are you talking about fraud? Are you talking about defamation? Are you talking about like, I'm like, this is gets annoying. I only have 240 characters or whatever, and I'm not going to spend 3 of it going over the basics. So I'm glad we can just move past that right away.
I mean, you got 240 characters in just one life. You can't be wasting on stuff like this.
Yeah.
But I was going to make a point about a lot of people I know, like mutuals and friends of mine, who define censorship as government only, not corporate censorship. I think that's a distinction that makes a lot of sense if you are trying to justify or otherwise turn a blind eye to certain acts of censorship and or certain acts of restricting speech. And I think it makes very little sense if you're actually trying to understand what we mean by free speech and its importance in society.
Yeah, I think there would be 2 kind of viewpoints of that. One would be very generous, saying that they're again being pedantic, that censorship only applies to government entities because of legal reasons. But then the other more likely reasons, one you're saying, is where people are just kind of honestly scared to even say or admit that. So I mean, I'll be the first to say, like, I think there should be some censorship. Like, I will freely state that, so we don't have to dance around kind of changing words for it. But what I consider that's where we have the discussion. But yeah, I see a lot of people, it's not censorship. It's, it's because it's okay. Then what is it? I mean, you're just going to use another synonym for censorship. So you might as well just come up and say it.
Right. So what would be like a type of censorship that you would endorse?
So, I mean, I would start with like, so my actual paper is about deepfakes, and, we all know what deepfakes are, and it is and will be a problem in the future. But even that within itself, I've crafted a very specific exception. My exception is deepfakes relating to political activity during election cycles. So I've taken this.
You believe should be banned?
Yes. So like if someone posts a fake video of AOC doing cocaine in the bathroom or something like that, like the day before her election or something, I would think that should be banned because of the impact it would have.
Do you think you should go to jail for it?
So that and then I love how these are different questions. No, I don't think it would be jail. So there's actually a few laws already on the books. In Texas, for example, they have it. They actually define it much more broader than me. I think too broad, honestly. And it's a misdemeanor with a fine, which mine would be something like that. I think having it, even just having some kind of punishment itself, just to be like it won't be tolerated. I don't think it should be criminal, especially in terms of imprisonment. I think that would be too strict.
Yeah, yeah. I haven't actually given much thought to the problems of deep fakes, to be honest. So let's approach the issue like this. What, in your own words, is the importance of free speech? Why should societies endorse some kind of idea of free speech, and why should we protect it?
So the idea and the foundation of free speech is to have an open society. So there's lots of different quotes from various justices and philosophers about how a free society cannot exist without free speech and a free discussion. And I think if you have that stifled and choked to a point where you can't have an honest conversation, or people are even self-censoring themselves before speaking, and that becomes a problem, especially in a democracy. In an authoritarian state, I mean, I'm not advocating this, of course, but like they don't have that issue, and people in those countries, when you talk to them about it, don't even kind of understand the concept sometimes just because they don't think about it. So it's such a huge difference between democratic nations and authoritarian countries. So it's like you need a free and open society in both the corporate and the government censorship world in order to have a robust society and have an open society.
I feel like you didn't really answer the question, because you just said, well, free speech is good because you need an open and robust society. But like, what? I mean, how does it facilitate that?
So it facilitates it. So you'll have an idea, and that idea can be critiqued. It can be narrowed. It can be defined. So you'll have, let's see, some kind of topic, like freedom of religion. So that'd be a great example. So you have people are allowed to worship whatever God they want, however form they want, and people are also allowed to criticize that religion. So in a lot of Middle Eastern countries, you have apostasy, you have all these laws against that, and it creates all these problems, and you have this religious minority persecution. In a free society with free speech, you don't have that problem, and when you do, it is addressed and it is defined. There are some special issues, like taxing churches and stuff like that, but that's not really as big an issue as people being able to express themselves and their religious views freely.
So I think I agree, but the way I would say it is, open inquiry, free inquiry is how we decide what's true. Being allowed to ask the question and follow it wherever it may go is, I think, probably the best way of deciphering truth that we've discovered so far.
Yeah, I would agree with that statement. I think having the ability to ask questions, have questions answered, and have questions criticized is the foundation of finding truth from a epistemological standpoint of finding out what is truth and all that. Which, I mean, even again, looking at other countries and other people's beliefs, sometimes that's not even as important as just living their lives. So that's kind of another, not necessarily like Western invention, but that is something kind of we pride and value more than other countries and other cultures. So it's kind of like our foundation in a way.
Yeah. I mean, an idea that's come into vogue, at least among the people I run into on Twitter.com, which is my only means of conversing with people, is that if you're left to open and free inquiry, that's how you kind of go down the rabbit hole of like conspiracy theorizing, and like that will lead to what they will call harmful ideas. And so I think it's sort of become in vogue to be like sort of my subjective experience.
Yeah. So like from our original thing we were just talking about is kind of more the idealized societies that free ideas should be readily available and accessible and debatable at all times. That's kind of the ideal we want, but just kind of the idea of even like free speech absolutism, you're still having this idea of, well, when you actually look at it, it does break down. So it's like having certain things that can't be discussed at certain times. For example, you can even use remember Geraldo Rivera during the Iraq War. He was on CNN or Fox, I forgot, and he was plotting out the troop movements live, and he got busted. Remember?
I'm only 14 years old, so I wasn't around for that, but I think I've heard of it. I think it rings a bell.
So like that's a great example of obviously, that's helping spread the idea of maybe people can debate the tactics of the troop movement, but obviously there's the more egregious issue of the enemy combatants watching that and being able to counter that. So it's like you are having all these free ideas, but in reality it is limited. But again, going back to our 1 to 10 scale, maybe the 10 will go to a 9 or even maybe an 8 or a 7, depending on the context and what's going on. So I think context does matter here. It's not just all the time, no matter what. And that's where you get into things like, wartime issues and stuff like that, which that gets even more kind of contentious. And most of the time, honestly, people have fucked up on that. But, at least there are some discussions there.
I think that the popular way among speech defenders, the popular response to the charge that conspiracy mongering is harmful and conspiracies are bad and hurt society and have victims. I think that the libertarian guy response to that is supposed to be to deny that it's true and be like, no, you're overstating harm, you're exaggerating. This stuff is actually harmless or doesn't matter. And I do sometimes think that a lot of people overstate the harm of conspiracy theories. I do think that, but I don't really deny the charge itself. I would actually agree that first of all, a lot of conspiracy theories like QAnon, which is basically a cult, or I don't know if it counts as a conspiracy theory. Well, anti-vaxxing is certainly closely related to conspiracy theories, at least a cousin. I agree. All of that does have material harm on society. I don't really dispute that. But my response would be, what's the better alternative? How else are we actually going to do the work of deciding what is and isn't true, if not to grant ourselves the permission to be wrong? And in fact, being wrong in almost any context carries with it certain repercussions, certain ramifications. It's almost always harmful to be wrong. But if we don't give ourselves the ability, discovering truth requires the ability to be wrong, is how I would answer that charge.
Yeah, I mean, and that's even kind of a basic tenet of, the scientific method is you try something, if it doesn't work, that's actually good because now you've learned one less thing not to do, and that can help put you on the right path. The problem here, though, is when you have issues with conspiracy theories, anti-vaxxing and 9/11, thermite, all that stuff, you basically have to kind of...
What's thermite?
You don't know thermite? So basically that, the steel beams couldn't melt...
Oh, okay.
The towers, so it had to have been planted explosives or whatever. I mean, this is like old school Alex Jones stuff.
Yeah. You should have just said jet fuel can't melt steel. I would have known
There
exactly.
Yeah. Okay, I forgot the damn. Okay, but so we have this idea of conspiracies harming, and I think you're right that most of the time it is overstated, especially when you have. This is
people online are like they're terrified of misinformation in a way that I think it is itself kind of irrational, to be honest.
I think it depends on what it is and what the effect is. I think
it does. You're correct. It does.
And I don't mean to keep using that as my default statement, but I mean context and nuance is a big thing about this. But I think I agree with you overall. Generally, there is a almost hysteria about these things. And sometimes it does create, kind of a Streisand effect where it's like censoring this and clamping down on this makes the conspiracy theorists kind of embolden and it boosts them. I mean, you have a lot of issues kind of obviously COVID and anti-vax is the big thing right now with, the horse paste and stuff like that, where you're having these people that are scientists in some way or another kind of pushing this without going into what's going on. But then it's like, I think if you, in those cases, you have to actually assess the actual threats. I mean, let's make a hypothetical where, there's like a zombie plague or something like that. And if you go outside at 4 p.m., you're going to catch it or whatever. And then you're having some host say it's not real. And he goes outside at another time, but it's actually 3 p.m. instead of 4 p.m. And he's walking around. He has 400 million followers and they all believe it and they all go outside. That, I don't know, as silly as that kind of sounds, that just made off the top of my head, that could be an issue of where, okay, this is obviously harmful, quantifiably harmful, and it should be censored, versus something where you're having discussions. So especially the World Health Organization was doing a lot of back and forth when COVID first came out about the efficacy of some of the treatments that were made and how it was spreading. And I know a lot of that was kind of being clamped down right away when that was still being understood. Mm-hmm. And I think that gave a lot more support and ammunition to the anti-vaxxers and the conspiracy theorists, because with the conspiracy theorists, they basically just shotgun ideas.
Yeah.
And if 1 out of 2,000 hit, they're going to do that. I mean, that's what pisses me off so much about Alex Jones is they're like, oh, he doesn't miss.
Yeah.
He's been doing it for like 25 years. Every day it's some new bullshit.
Yeah.
And yeah, some kind of random word combination is going to stick, and then they're going to use that to say he's right.
Yeah. The Alex Jones is right. Memes are always extremely thin if you look into them.
Well, it's
the water actually was turning the frogs gay. No, it wasn't. No.
Yeah, but like the issue with that. But it's like, but you do have people, I don't know how much people actually meme it or how much people actually mean it, because it does seem, especially, like
what a clever play on words.
I know, right? Because he's been banned, right? So talking about, corporate censorship, he's banned from Twitter, YouTube, Facebook. I'm not sure he's banned from Facebook. I know he's banned from Twitter and YouTube, but he still kind of circumvents that. I mean, he's on Tim Pool all the time. He was on Crowder like last week or something like that. So going back to the differences here, but going back to the issue of something, I think that if you can quantify the harm, which that in itself is a discussion, and it's actually doing damage now, and it's not curbing ideas and free speech to a degree that would be unacceptable, that's when it should be censored. And that, I know it's very wide and open, but that's just kind of a general rule. But the caveats to that are that most people overstate the harm, and kind of there is that Streisand effect of banning it might actually make it more popular. And that's all actually from a more governmental standpoint. I think corporate can actually be stronger and should be stronger. They have kind of more of a duty, without getting into like Section 230, because that's kind of like too complicated into today. But just the idea that some information, it at least having a warning. I mean, as corny as the Twitter, like this information is disputed. I have seen.
Yeah, I fucking hate that shit.
I know it's stupid. I think it's stupid, but actually it has been like quantified that it does help. There was some studies on that, especially ones with, I actually did another one with her being like racist language. I think I posted that one time, and you and got into the weeds about it, but there is some.
Wait, get into the weeds. Me and who?
It was one of the ones where we were talking about deplatforming.
Okay.
Which deplatforming works. I'm just gonna say that. Move on. We can come back to part 2 for that. That's not about. That's
okay.
Not about censorship. Maybe we could come back to it at the end. But it was kind of support for that. And then the other half of my research actually deals with the Russian collusion, and they were analyzing the bots and taking out the bots and seeing the difference. Or when Trump got deplatformed, you actually could quantify the differences here. So,
wait, the differences in what?
In actual like conspiracy theory and disinformation and misinformation being spread, it tanked when he got out.
Wait, you're saying that when Twitter banned Donald Trump, misinformation being trafficked on their platform plummeted in a way that correlated with his banning?
Yes.
Okay. There's not very many clear ways of quantifying what disinformation actually is. Every metric we have for measuring it, I feel like is too subjective. So I'm immediately suspicious.
And I do understand that this is where people get a little tiffy with you about being stringent, but I understand and I appreciate the pushback, because you're right. Having this idea of it is hard to quantify misinformation even more than disinformation, because disinformation is literally like a lie versus misinformation where it's just misleading.
Right. Here's how I understand the difference. Misinformation is just saying something that is not correct, whereas disinformation is a strategy meant to employ discord or argument or
disinformation is deliberately lying, which I can name it.
Well, but misinformation can be deliberate too, but the way I understand the difference is that disinformation is part of like some kind of campaign. It's coordinated. That's my understanding.
That's kind of a broader interpretation. I mean, like a strict definition would be just kind of deliberate lying versus misinformation, where it's like you're basically not telling the whole story. They can both be coordinated.
Here is the problem I have. Here's the inherent difficulty of actually trying to classify misinformation / disinformation. The most effective lies are rooted in the truth. And in fact, really skilled liars can mislead you without saying anything that's technically false.
Yeah, and that's a great point, actually, because it's kind of interesting that misinformation honestly is a bigger problem than disinformation. But because misinformation is more tricky and thornier to weed out, and because there could be so much overlap with truth and just asking questions, censoring misinformation, I can't think of an example where that should be allowed. But disinformation, because it's more quantifiable of, alternative facts, this is bullshit information, it can be more readily like, okay, this person's just lying, and they're lying on purpose to discredit or to basically persuade people to do a wrong thing or something bad. That's why I'm focusing on more disinformation. Misinformation, I think actually the best way to counter that is to actually clarify and talk about it. And that's why when you see all the alt-right accounts posting bullshit, or someone's claiming a 49 state victory or whatever bullshit, you can easily counter that. It's not just it's so much, oh, here's a lie. Here's something they're kind of trying to bullshit with, and then you can actually exploit that fairly easily. Is showing the whole article or showing a clip from it, especially when they have those like clickbait headlines. It's so easy to just open it up and screenshot what it's actually talking about. So, okay, what was the issue there? Because I wasn't even arguing censorship. I'm actually arguing to have a robust debate and then talk about misinformation. Disinformation is the one that I think is harder to deal with in that way, because the biggest issue is, even though it's a lie, and even though people know it's a lie, they'll still believe it or they won't care. And that is a fairly well understood psychological phenomenon. And that's why especially deep fakes are such a problem, because it doesn't matter if people are told they're right. They don't give a shit. That's the issue.
Once you remove open inquiry and discourse as our path to the truth, what remains? No matter how you approach it, no matter how you carve it up, no matter how you try to spin it, what remains is a priest class telling us what is true. And the problem with that is that the priest class do not know what's true. So how much of these disputes that we have come down to people on the ground trying to discern what's true, and then weeks later we find out that oftentimes, quite innocently, they just said things that we know to be false, because the priests don't know what is true. They're just with the rest of us trying to figure it out. They don't have some special access to the truth that we lack. They might have expertise. They might be very smart in their field, but they don't have some special access to truth that the rest of us don't.
Well, I mean, sometimes you don't need special access, or even, if someone is like, I gotta make another like stupid, silly hypothetical off the bat, but if someone's out there saying, you can drink bleach, and then he drinks bleach, but it's really Kool-Aid or whatever, and thousands of kids start emulating him or whatever, it's not gonna.
I mean, that's a very clear-cut case of malicious lying.
Yeah,
but I just don't think that it bears much resemblance to most of what we're arguing about.
So, and that's why kind of when I'm advocating for these things, I'm starting kind of on the periphery and working inside because it is a thorny issue. So that's why I'm being very precision with my scalpel here of what should be censored and what should be cut, just because if you veer off the course even a little bit, you're going to get into that area that you're talking about where is it actually objectively false, or is this just because I mean, even when you get into things like science, I mean, from a philosophical point, science is supposed to be 1 + 1 = 2 and all that bullshit, but when you actually get into it, I mean, when you get into quantum physics and all that stuff, nothing's really real or whatever. You have that with some issues as well. So even with medical information, I could say something like eating tomatoes increases internal bleeding, which actually that was like a real thing I read somewhere, which was because I hate tomatoes, so I use that as like an example. But even that's like a half-assed like quote I just picked up because I'm using it selfishly. But if I start like spreading that, everywhere and people stop eating tomatoes or whatever, okay. But if we're doing something where someone is taking a drug instead of a free drug given by the government to stop deadly plague, and that's actually causing hundreds of thousands of people to die, that's where it's become something real and quantifiable and something that should be stopped as a public health issue.
Yeah, so I get what you're trying to do. You're trying to approach at the edges where where it's a little more clear cut and try to develop heuristics for navigating murkier territory, things where it's not so clear cut.
Yeah, and there's actually different ways to do it too. I mean, there's kind of what you learn in common law with the First Amendment is there's content neutral and content based censorship. So then that's kind of where, going back to my original argument in my paper, where it's about deepfake specifically. So it's not even disinformation, misinformation, like a very quantifiable type of program, type of file related to elections. Again, a specific type of speech, and then during election cycles, a specific time. So it's like you see how I'm very, very like carefully moving along these edges. So I'm not just doing a very broad one. So again, kind of going back to the Texas one, it doesn't even give a time or even like a thing. It just says generally, deep fakes concerning someone that does an action that does not reflect reality. That's like almost verbatim what it says, which I'm like, okay, this is probably gonna get struck down honestly for being too vague. So it's like when you approach these
Wait,
things,
are you talking about something on the books now?
Yeah. That this is fuck if I have my damn thing. I can actually cite
This
the
is
code.
the Texas law that you mentioned before?
Yeah. I can look while you're talking.
No, don't worry about it. Just
Okay.
go on.
Yeah, so it's like having that, and that's I think is the only way to approach it, because even historically, any censorship that's broad is going to get struck down right away. I mean, they've even had things where there was a court case about a rule that banned billboards having political. Actually, it wasn't even political. It was just having billboards within voting booths during the season, and that was struck down as being too political. So it's like even when you're talking about First Amendment things, our First Amendment is crazy powerful, which I think that is still good. And
Yeah,
it's
I think
always
it's
funny
great.
to hear other people in other countries criticizing it and talking about it when they really have no idea what they're talking about, honestly. Because we as Americans, we have this sense when we go to other places and we hear about their cases or their issues. I mean, it's like unreal to us to be like, how can you live in this kind of society? So it's like that's always at the core heart of it, and no one, I think, except for the fringes on both the left and right, would argue about seriously hampering that and stopping that. I don't think that's ever going to change, hopefully.
Uh-huh.
All right, let's do it. Okay.
Before we segue, I just I didn't answer my own question. I asked you what you think the value of free speech is and why it's important. And I agreed with what you said, but if someone were to ask me that, my answer would be that and this is like corny. I freely I'm leaning into being corny about this, but I really think that that words and ideas are the ability to change the world. I really believe in the power of them, and I think that power shouldn't belong to any centralized authority. I think it should belong to the people. That's my reason for being so passionate about free speech.
That's an interesting answer, because that actually would be the argument against limiting speeches in some cases, because of the influence, because of what it can do, is because the words do have influence, do have power. I mean, that's kind of why.
Yeah, too many supposed defenders of speech hide behind this. It doesn't matter. Oh, it's just words. Doesn't hurt anyone. It doesn't matter. And I think that that's just a really flat defense of speech, because what you're arguing is that since it doesn't matter, I suppose we don't need to pass laws banning it, but we also don't really need to defend it, do we? If it doesn't matter. Whereas if we believe that these things actually have value, actually are important, then it makes sense to mount a passionate defense for them.
I really like that. I think that's a very good kind of counter, and it's not even a counter against like censorship or not. It's just a counter about people not valuing freedom of speech and what it actually does. Because you're absolutely right; it affects people both positively and negatively. And I think kind of having someone take a position where you're acknowledging that there are harms in having freedom of speech, especially like having, our level 9.5 in America versus another country where it's like you won't have these issues. I mean, if you go to, totalitarian countries, you won't have issues of people getting defamed or not, because it doesn't happen, or it happens very rarely, and it's crushed. I mean, obviously there's huge losses in not being able to express yourself, but they don't have some of our problems. So it's like, you can't just say, oh yeah, freedom of speech is absolutely perfect, everything about it is wonderful, there's no downsides. That's just wrong. But obviously taking it overall and what the kind of pursuit of truth and what we were talking about earlier, it's definitely worth it, no question.
Yeah, I mean, isn't freedom, it's by definition a double-edged sword? I mean, it contains the freedom to do bad things, to harm others, to make bad choices.
Yep, absolutely.
All right, man. Let's talk about deplatforming. So, what did you say about deplatforming before? That got really
with the Trump
got me ruffled up. Yeah. Okay. You said that.
Yeah, so they've quantified. I'm saying they in a very broad sense. I will try and find you some sources and post it up there, because I know you're all about your sources and stuff.
I love sources.
Deplatforming works. Having these people that spread disinformation and misinformation, or just kind of general pieces of shit, stopping them from spreading their message and limiting that message does limit the information. I mean, it's just kind of like a piece of a pie. If you have the pie that's the entirety of the internet, 40% Twitter, 40% Facebook, 30% Instagram, and 3% Gab or whatever, cutting out the 80%, I'm so bad at math, out of the equation and leaving them with 3%, it's going to limit their ability to influence and interact with people. I mean, that's just a fact. That's just mathematically what's going to happen.
Okay. Here's my response. That I'm going to be careful in how I quantify that. I think that when we talk about deplatforming, we're talking about two distinct things that really don't have any overlap. There is activist deplatforming, which is, what they did on college campuses in 2016 to try to shut down invited speakers that they didn't like, or trying to get people kicked off YouTube or things like that. That doesn't work. I will absolutely 100% die on this hill. All those college activists did was enrich people like Ben Shapiro and Milo Yiannopoulos and give them relevance they wouldn't otherwise have had. And that's why all those people openly court protesters, because it demonstrably just enriches them. And then on the other side, you have deplatforming by Facebook. You have deplatforming by Google and YouTube. You have deplatforming by our overlords. And that oftentimes can be quite effective. I think it was pretty effective against Alex Jones. People keep citing Milo. I will absolutely go to my grave insisting that Milo was undone by. I mean, if you want to say Milo was deplatformed, fine, but he was deplatformed by Breitbart and the Mercer family. He wasn't deplatformed by activists or even by Twitter, really. And
I thought with him was when Amazon removed his books after his pedophilia taught me how to give head interview. I'm not sure about the timeline though, so
I'm not sure that that happened. He had around the time that that was revealed and like went public. He had a book deal, I believe, with Simon and Schuster,
Yeah.
and that book deal ended up tanking when, according to Simon and Schuster, they denied they rejected his manuscript as being just not up to their standards and being a mess.
Now, what was the timing of that suspect with what he? I swear it was like around the same time.
I'd have to look, but Milo, okay. Milo didn't. I'm not sure he even had books to be delisted on Amazon at that time. I think that book with Simon Schuster might have been his first. He's written others since then, but I'm not.
So my timeline's off with that too. So I'll defer to your judgment on that. But like,
okay,
Mr. Molly meme, for example, though, he's definitely deplatformed. I mean, who talks about him anymore?
Sure.
Besides Taylor Swift egg memes.
Yeah, absolutely. Besides, memeing on him, which is always fun. Which I've actually been chastised against on online. People telling me that that memeing on Stephen Molyneux is platforming him, which I think is a straight misunderstanding of the term. But I'll agree that that Molyneux was successfully deplatformed by YouTube.
Yay! All right, close the chat. I did my job.
What?
I just wanted to hear you say deplatforming works even in a single instance.
Okay. Yeah.
Okay.
Well, I said it several minutes ago. I said deplatforming by our big tech overlords seems to me to be pretty successful, but that's a switch that doesn't belong
like that
to us.
distinction that you did between activist deplatforming and what the corporate or overlord. I 100% agree with that. I remember seeing those videos of Dave Rubin trying to talk down the crowd that was getting rowdy or whatever, and I was like, this is just dollars in his pocket. Like, this is insane, and people are so dumb for thinking this is going to do anything but make him look like the enlightened centrist he wishes he was. So I 100% agree with that.
Yeah, right. And I mean, and I think that Dave Rubin example, I think I know exactly the one you're referring to. I think that's one of the more innocuous examples, because there's a video of Jordan Peterson on the Rogan Experience talking about how those protests enriched him, how he was able to monetize the social justice warrior pushback.
I shouldn't say this, but I'm going to, because it's just so goddamn funny. I can't help but say it. I figured out how to monetize social justice warriors.
That is what it is.
I know, it's so funny. I just can't believe it.
It's the other way.
It just, every time I think that, well, it's just one of the surreal circumstances that characterize my life. It's like I'm driving the social justice activists in Canada mad, because if they let me speak, then I get to speak, and then more people support me on Patreon. It's like, that's annoying. It's like, goddamn capitalists make more money off this ideological warfare. It's like, okay, fine, let's go protest them. So they go protest me, and then that goes up on YouTube, and then my Patreon account goes way up. So it's like they don't know what to do.
I think it's a really pernicious effect, and I think that to some extent activists have the ability to deplatform people. They have the ability to deplatform the people they support. So if activists turn on, say, Natalie Wynn, I think that has that has more ability, although still very finite, to hurt her in a way that they just don't have to hurt Crowder or Milo or whoever it is.
Yeah, like that's another like brilliant point, that especially on the left is they're just so quick to cannibalize each other, and it's really ironic, like you just said, that their own kind of inner tribal fighting does much more damage than they've ever done, even with like a coordinated attack on the right and stopping them. Is like when Natalie Wynn did her little I don't even know if it was a joke or just like a reference about like the slutty asexual girls or whatever.
Yeah,
I forgot what she said, but like she did it and then she deleted it and then she got dragged for like 3 days.
It was about how when Zoomers talk about their identity, their LGBTQ identity, she doesn't understand. She doesn't understand what they're talking about. And it's very relatable to anyone who is 30 or over, any of us over 30s. Yeah. So, I think there is a generational divide there, and it's very relatable to us. I don't want to spend a lot of time talking about Natalie, but I'll just say that the way her detractors think about her, she's like a priest to them. Like she makes these like, you know, offhand remarks on twitter.com, and they treat them like they're these like ancient scrolls that need to be deciphered. And I'm not, I would defend Natalie not in being right or wrong. I think it's very possible she was wrong. I don't know. I haven't really thought much about like Zoomer queer identities, to be honest. But what if she's wrong? Why do you do not need Natalie Wynn to edify and endorse your personal identity. You simply don't need it. And the false belief that you do is derangement.
Yeah, I mean, you see this all the time, and again, this is much more on the left than the right. Having this idea of every streamer, Twitcher, or whatever you watch has to be 100% in alignment with all of your political views at all times. Otherwise, they're, you know, XYZ and you know, not real or whatever. I mean, it's just so stupid and it's so harmful. And this idea of not having solidarity and having people that even slightly disagree or haven't taken your exact stance just being like tossed to the wolves, while the right can just, you know, sit back and laugh and bring more people into it. And especially when you're having people that have come from the right to the left having this, you know, scarlet letter for the rest of their lives, no matter what. You know, like I even see that with David a lot. Like when he'll post about stuff. And
who's David?
What do you call it? Discord spies. Yeah. Right. So to his credit, like, you know, he obviously is not who he was at 18 or 19, but he has that somewhat. I mean, I understand
like a men's rights advocate of some kind.
Yeah.
Like 18. Yeah.
Peacocking like or whatever else. Yeah. But like even now, whatever he posts, it's going to be automatically seen with that kind of lens. And it's kind of unfair to him, especially since, he's 18, 19. I mean, that's a kid. I mean, everybody does stupid shit when they're a kid. And having that follow with him, I don't know if he's like 24 or 25 now or whatever.
Yeah, I think he's like 23, 24.
Yeah, right. So he's still having these, you know, kind of shackles and just getting tossed to the wolves no matter what. And then the same thing with anyone, you know, if anyone gets canceled for any little thing on the left, that's going to be dragged. So it's like, I guess, you know, again, deplatforming works in that way because people are constantly trying to pull each other down to get to the top of the ladder for the day until they get tossed down.
I would not point to that as an example of deplatforming working because I can't decipher what it's even meant to accomplish. What do any of these purity tests actually accomplish? Absolutely nothing. Yeah. Every week there's a new one. My favorite was when people were screaming at each other over self-administered HRT drugs. What the fuck are you like that they get on the black market? What are any of you people talking about? And they had the ones where it had like the hentai logos on it or whatever. What would possess you to get in? And I love arguing on the internet, and I cannot, for the life of me, understand what would possess someone to get in an argument about that. But I have to say, even though I agreed with you earlier, I winced when you described the situation as harmful, because that term is just like a red flag to me now. Harmful. Should I say bad? What's wrong with harmful? I mean, on the face of it, there's nothing. I mean, harm is a really broad category of things. There's lots of things that are harmful, right? A sedentary lifestyle is harmful. A bad breakup is harmful, right? But we've just maybe counterproductive. Is that a better? I mean, I think on the face of it, harmful is fine, but I also think that the left has just embraced this language of overstating harm that is rather pernicious, I guess I have to say, because I can't call it harmful. So I have to use a euphemism that means the same thing. But I wince not because I disagree with it, but because I feel like people on the left used to say violence, and that was awful. And I'm glad that they switched to harm, but harm just seems to have taken the place of violence. It's this catch-all bucket that we throw everything in, and without distinguishing between the many different types of harm. You know, the harm of your girlfriend breaking up with you is quite different than the harm of being shot in a robbery, right? Yeah. These are different categories, and it's important that we recognize these different categories.
And I mean, honestly, what I would like to see, and I'm not sure if this exists, but I hope it does someday, is the actual effect that streamers and the left and the right have on like the political process, and how much these debates and all this, cancel culture, the activist platforming actually do. I mean, I'm sure the activist deplatforming is probably next to nil, if not a net gain for the people they're trying to get, like you said with Peterson, making money off of it, versus these people where they're just constantly engaged in this, online drama, tearing each other down. I mean, it's hard. There we go. It's being counterproductive towards the movement. And I'm sure even a lot of them understand this and just don't give a shit. I mean, there's so many people who are just LARPing online and never going to actually contribute to society or to the political movements they, love to, espouse. But it's just really annoying. And that's why, like, when I see more of it now, I'm just like, fuck this. Like, I'll focus on something important or it's a topic I actually know about, like, like the whole land grab thing. I'm like, no one here knows what they're talking about. This is just idiotic. Like, when I actually hear a person that knows what they're talking about or like has written and worked on it or something, and it's like weird because a lot of these.
Do you have a land back take?
Not particularly, because it is pretty complicated and to explain it, and that's not just me running away from it.
Yeah, I certainly don't have a land back take. I'm running away from it, guilty as charged.
Yeah, I mean it's a discussion, but even I would have to like prep, and I already know a lot about it. I actually studied under one of the proponents of it from Arizona State for law school. He was actually a visiting professor, and he talked about it. He wrote some great books on it. But
maybe you can go on Professor Flowers' YouTube channel to debate her about it.
I would love that, and I actually have an actual Native American word, so I can pull that out.
You're breaking up.
You can't hear me?
No, say it again.
I said I actually have a Native American card, like legally. Like,
oh, you're a member of a tribe?
Yeah.
I thought you were going to say that you had a Native American headdress that you were going to wear on camera during the debate.
Full Burning Man style.
Yeah, totally. Oh, so you're a Native American. What tribe are you from?
I am from Choctaw, but not as much as, I mean, I'm more than Elizabeth Warren by far.
Yeah. So you're you know what's funny? You know what's funny about Elizabeth Warren? I was just thinking about it. So you know how people were saying that she was like a 1024th Native American. Yeah. If you actually do the math on that, I think that goes back further than white people have been in America. So if she actually is 1/1000th Native American, I think that's a pretty legitimate claim, actually.
It's funny because I'm doing bankruptcy law, and I forgot that actually that was her focus, and all professors had a choice of her book or the other one, and hers was just way too theoretical and like not useful. And they're like, yeah, she's brilliant, but kind of not very useful for real matters. And it's like, hey, it's good.
All right, so we said we were going to do a tight hour. We're at the hour mark. Do you want to? Should we find a closing thought and wind down?
Yeah. So I guess what do we want to do to summarize here? Basically, deplatforming works. Wink, wink. We kind of understood the differences.
Okay, I will agree with you, Kai, but I will just add that the type of deplatforming that works is a tool that belongs to the ruling class, and it's something that we as leftists should be destroying. There shouldn't be. Mark Zuckerberg shouldn't have an off switch to your speech. We should be removing those.
And I think that in and of itself, which I mainly agree with you, but that's kind of another topic. But I do like your distinction between activism and the corporate overlord one.
All right.
And then, kind of the idea of censorship and having this being upfront about people wanting censorship and not really being absolutist. And actually,
did you just say you people? And then finally, I think that the last closing thought is the state of the online left is absolutely depressing.
Yeah.
All right. Great. Good convo. Thanks for coming on. We should I'm trying to organize a game night. We should do a game night sometime.
That'd be pretty cool. Yeah.
Yeah. Totally, man.
All right. Thanks for having me on.
Yeah. Thanks for coming on. All right.
Look forward to seeing it.
Take care.